Here's the roadmap for today. We're going to basically walk through three quick and simple turnkey event formats. And we'll start off by talking a little bit about what I call the show and tell. And really the goal for all of today actually is sometimes it's hard to come up with an event idea. There are 12 months in a year, and if we're trying to fill most of those with a NetSquared event, sometimes it's a bit of a struggle to uh, to actually find someone who can come in to be that guest presenter, or even worse, we've all had that last minute cancellation where the presenter disappears and you're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do this month? And so some of the goal for this month is for us to basically talk here today about, well, what can we do that will just quickly solve that gap. And so here are three event formats that we can do without needing a presenter because we're basically leveraging the skills in the room. So some of an event I stole from my co-organizer, Chad Lehman, is something called the show and tell. And I've dropped a link into the chat window on the right around that. And basically the show and tell is quick 5-minute life hack style demos from your members. And so what you do is you basically invite everyone up and say, like, show me a tool or an online trick you have that will allow you to basically be a bit more effective in your work. And so people come up and show off like a project management tool like Trello. Someone will come off and show like here's an add-on to that adds like CRM features to something like Google Gmail, and things like that. So you get to go and be super fancy, and people get to show off their skills. What I found with this event format is it works really smooth and easy. Basically, all you need to do is get 3 people in your community ahead of time to commit to doing a quick 5-minute demo. Because once you've basically had 3 people come and model what the event should look like and what a quick demo can look like, then everyone else puts up their hand, and usually I gotta an hour and a half later I gotta shut them down and force people out of the room because they're so eager to come and show what they've got. Because we've all got here's this cool tagging research tool I use all the time for Twitter. In fact, I'm going to drop into the chat here a nice little storify that sort of shows some of the sample links of what happened at a recent show and tell we did in Vancouver. And that'll give you a good idea of the breadth of the kinds of tips and tools. So everyone's used things like, someone did here's Vimeo, and this is why I think it's more useful to my organization than using YouTube. Someone else used a tool that basically helped them pick up color schemes for designing email templates and websites. So there's a lot of different varieties where people get to come in and show off and say, here's something that'll blow your mind. And if someone comes and does a product pitch, well, it's 5 minutes and we can suffer for 5 minutes because we're just going to keep the cycle going. And so I found that has been a super fun event format where all you really need is a projector, a laptop, and a couple eager people. And as long as you've probably got 5 people, you've got enough people to keep that cycle going. To help you out with that event format, on the page on the Organizer's Handbook, I've actually got a cut and paste event description that you can use. So all you need to do is just go to Meetup, cut, paste, click Announce, and then identify 3 of your friends who can participate with really quick demos of their favorite tip or tool. I'm wondering if any of you have ever done any other kind of sort of crowdsourced event like that where you've had your members come and share their favorite tips or techniques.
We've done that in NetSquared Midlands. Yeah, tools. Tools are always a good one.
Cool. What did you call it? I just used one name, but you can call it whatever you want. What do you go for?
Just favorite tools, I think. We had
Yeah.
a lot of video. Yeah.
Yeah, we just
And people were really keen.
Yeah, so we just asked people to suggest, didn't we? We did one on video, but we also just did what's your favorite tool. I've used the show and tell format before, but we just asked people to share a good time-saving tip or a tool or website that's helped them in the past few months, something that's helped them be more productive, and just stand up for a couple of minutes. If you've got a video screen or a laptop there, then ask them to give a quick sort of 1 minute sort of pencil demo of it, just the quick outline of what it does.
Yeah, actually, that's a
And
great
then
piece
the
of feedback,
conversation
which
just
is you don't
starts.
even need if you have a smaller group, just a laptop, you could all gather around. You don't even necessarily
Yeah,
need to bring
yeah.
out a screen.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I'm glad that that kind of tool-focused thing really worked for you in Birmingham as well.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Anyone else sort of done something in this kind of like more demo-focused event formats? Well, if not, this is your chance to give it a shot. I think you'll find that your members actually are going to find it quite memorable. I've had a lot of people say, like, this was actually the best thing I had. In fact, one of the best quotes I have from my group on Meetup is there was the Association of Fundraising Professionals event happening in Vancouver about 4 years ago. Um, and so basically our event was like the day after, and the comment from one of our users was like, I just paid $1,000 to go to this AFP conference, but actually I learned more in this like 1 hour event where I got to just do demos with my peers than I did in the conference. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, interesting piece of feedback. So
Mm-hmm.
people get pretty excited about this because as you say, they get to show off. They get to like demonstrate their expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So the other way I think we can come at events without needing to find an expert is sort of to basically create what I would call almost office hours, which is to say we often do in the NetSquared community these big 1 hour events, or maybe even an hour and a half, where someone comes up to the front, they lecture, they present, and all we've really done to our members is we've frightened them about like, oh my gosh, here's another thing I need to learn. Here's another thing I need to master. I don't have the time. Where do I go next? How do I figure this new thing out? How do I figure out Google Analytics? How do I start optimizing my email campaigns? How do I start thinking about building out my next online fundraising campaign? And and so one of the ways you can come at your next event is to say, if I don't have a presenter, maybe what instead I can do is basically just do a follow-up event to one of the events you've done in the past. So say you've done an event on, say, maybe Google Analytics recently. Well, that's a big, complicated tool, and no one's going to master that in an hour. So what
Mm-hmm.
I've often done is just invite all of my attendees to say, like, hey, if you want to keep talking about whatever we talked about at our last event, why don't you join us at this local cafe, next week right here, and we'll just sort of have like a peer-led discussion where we'll all help each other through what are the next steps on using that tool. And I have not found, like, usually the crowd is quite a bit smaller. Like, I usually get like 5 to 8 people out. So it's a much smaller gathering. So we all just gather in a corner of a cafe around a laptop or two. But I found for the participants, it's super handy. For me as an organizer, I actually find it really rejuvenating and refreshing to actually get hands-on with a smaller group instead of being part of a larger gathering. And I think for the attendees, you get to actually go a little bit deeper and start, building on what began at our last event. So I found that that's another really quick turnkey event, is just to say, like, well, let's do what we did last month. Let's, so in the case of like our friends in Vermont, they've done a lot of digital storytelling events, and this could be a chance for people to come in, share some of the work they've done, and then maybe for the group to discuss, like, what would be our next steps, like how could we tweak it, how could we improve that. Does this resonate for you? Is that something that you think might work within your own group?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has anyone tried something like this where they basically just meet informally in a cafe and sort of do a discussion about like one of the past events you've already done?
We have done in Macedonia, for instance, we have organized many non-formal meetings that are sometimes more relaxed than official meeting like in the offices, in premises, and people openly are more relaxed to discuss about the issues that they are facing with, during the work, and what they need and what they want to do and how they want to achieve their missions easier. Or we sometimes share ideas how to do that, or partnerships are sometimes more easier to create when you're in a non-formal discussion.
Yeah, I actually really like that piece of feedback around the informality. And it really reminds me that some of these informal event styles have been a way for me to bring out much more senior people than normally show up at my events. So I've often had executive directors or people who sort of run larger consulting shops show up at some of these more informal discussions because I think they're really nervous about being like the senior person in the community who stands up at the back of a big group and puts up their hand and asks a question that reveals that they're ignorant around something, which they get nervous about because of their reputation, because of their business, and in these smaller settings they get a little bit more comfortable in asking some of the harder questions as well. So Pauline, you've got something here in the comments a little bit about using TED Talks as a way to sort of seed discussions. Can you talk about that?
Well, I did it for another networking group I'm part of, a women's business network, and I just did excerpts from like 4 talks that were about empowering women. And I'm sure, I know there's loads of TED YouTube videos about other technical, digital skills type things that I think might be useful. I've been asked for a guide to Slack, by the way, for another group, another network I'm part of. So I'm looking for that at the moment, and I think that might be helpful. That might be useful and interesting for NetSquared as well.
Yeah, actually, and speaking of Slack guides, remember actually the WordPress community had a pretty good Slack guide they put together when they first brought that in to their members. And speaking of Slack, here's something that, oh my God, we're broadcast here. Anyways, keep this secret for me. So actually, TechSoup has recently become the Slack validation partner. So basically, if you have a valid TechSoup account, you basically get like really quick and instantaneous validations if you ask for the Slack donated product, because for nonprofits they'll do up to 100 like sort of pro user licenses. So definitely look for the Slack for nonprofit page, but don't tell them that TechSoup's involved. That's a bit of a secret, he says, live broadcasting to the world. Anyways. I don't think it's the world's biggest secret, but it's a semi-secret. So, but yeah, definitely look for the Slack nonprofit guide. In fact, if any of you can sort of find that link and drop that here in the group chat, that might be helpful. So then the third thing I want to talk about, and actually I'm really glad that I've got people here from the UK, is the social media surgery, which is an event format we stole as a sort of a NetSquared network from the UK and have now brought that through Latin America, through Africa. It's really sort of been something that NetSquared helped popularize outside of the continent, but its real heart is in the UK. Paul, would you be okay if I put you on the spot here, because you are one of like the people who was there in the beginning?
Wow. Yeah. Well, both, Pauline and I both got a long track record, I suppose, of being involved in social media surgeries. It sort of grew from, they've been around, as far as I know anyway, since about 2008. And it really just grew from an idea of social media being the new thing on the block. It was Twitter, Facebook, and all of those websites were new. A lot of non-profits and charities weren't quite sure how to get started. So a bit like the last idea of just sitting around a table in a coffee shop and saying, hey, we've heard about this thing called Twitter, but we don't really understand it. Let's try and work it out together. Is pretty much how social media surgery started, where a non-profit organisation would come along with a question. I want to be able to reach out to my members in a more productive way than I'm currently doing. and I've heard about this website that I might be able to use, or can you tell me a website that will be able to, that I can use to achieve this aim? And then a few people, sort of the early starters, the people that play with the toys, the inquisitive ones, the ones that as soon as Slack or whatever it is released, we're in there, we're trying out these websites, we're trying to break them, we're seeing what the what the for good angle is on them. I mean, that's always the way that I approach it, is, you know, what's Slack for good, Twitter for good, Facebook for good? What are the ways that non-profit organisations can use those? And then, yeah, so the format of the surgery is, well, can be as basic as your last example, where we just sit around a table and talk about a tool, through to there is a website written by.
I just tweeted it. I've just put it in the chat.
You've just dropped a link in there. Social
media in the chat, yeah.
.com, yeah.
Surgery.com.
And that's written by a colleague of Pauline Hours over here in Birmingham, where you can register your social media surgery all for free, and handle the sort of the admin side of taking the bookings. It's a bit like Meetup for social media surgeries, I guess, is probably the best way to describe it. And then the format of the surgery really is just turn up at the time in the cafe or the venue where you said you're going to be, bring along a laptop, and just start the conversations. Some of them are completely flexible, where we don't know who's going to arrive, and there's just a bunch of surgeons, as we call ourselves, waiting around for people to just drop in and ask their questions. Other surgeries are a little bit more formal, if that's the right word, where you get a half an hour, for example, half an hour slot. You must be here at 6:30 and you've got until 7 o'clock to talk about your question, and we'll answer it. But there's always a lot of flexibility, and often it's down to how many helpers, how many surgeons there are there, and how many non-profits come along. But yeah, I won't sort of take up the whole hour, but plenty of stories of organisations that have come in and had their questions answered, from as sort of simple as, what's the difference between an @ symbol and a hashtag on Twitter? Could you explain it to me? We go through that for sort of 15 minutes, and then that's it. They're off, ready to tackle the next challenge with using social media. But one thing I will just sort of, to wrap up on this one, just to say, is one of the sort of the most powerful sort of sides, I suppose, of a social media surgery is, this is way back at the beginning as well, when an organisation that we helped get started with blogging, I think it was, using WordPress, came along to 2 or 3 social media surgeries and sort of grew their knowledge of WordPress over that period of time. And then after about 3 months or so, the person from that organisation came back and said, "Can I be a surgeon now?" So they'd moved on sufficiently to be able to feel that their skills were enough to then give something back into that social media surgery community. So it's really nice when that sort of does the full circle.
Yeah, totally. Well, so Barry, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll be around. I'll also be, of course, posting this video in about, later today. Paul, I think your comment on just the basic level of so many of the questions is really important, because often as organizers we get a little bit like, I got to find the top experts, or also the experts you invite are like, well, I'm not that good. Like, I don't know if I'm the person you want to be leading a social surgery group. And I think we just need to really remind them just how basic so many of the big questions are, and actually how much skills they have to contribute compared to the average organization. So that's a really useful reminder. And when it's come to recruitment, I've come at it sort of 2 ways, which is, well, actually 3 ways. Sometimes I've come with, like, I didn't have any actual surgeons or experts, and all I did was just pull from the audience. Like, just say, like, oh, you seem to know a couple things. Why don't you lead this discussion over here, and keep it super informal. Other times I've actually done some recruitment to basically go to, like, 5 people I kind of know, or past presenters from my NetSquared group, which is another great resource for finding like surgeons and saying like, why don't you come here? You don't need to do a presentation. All you got to do is just hang out with us for 2 hours. I'll feed you tea. You get to help out some local nonprofits. And then the more structured way to do this, and often it's a great way if you've been talking to a local company and they're trying to look for a way to bring their staff into like a volunteering experience, is to basically go to like a local marketing agency or place who might have like more than one social media surgery or social media expert within the community, and basically say like, why don't we partner? Why don't you provide me with the 3 experts? We'll go to your office and you can sort of basically be the co-host of the surgery. So where I live in Vancouver, it's the Hootsuite head offices. So I have this great opportunity to basically leverage these expert coaches they've got who spend all day talking to boring enterprise customers and instead hook them up with local nonprofits. And so they always come out of that super excited. So when you guys think about like, you know, who you might be able to recruit as an expert for some of your social media surgeries, where do you think you might find like some social media savvy people in your community? Oh, looks like, oh, Pauline might be on another call.
Shall I chip in?
Yeah, go for it, go for it.
Yeah. Quite often we found that, and it does take a little bit of sort of digging around, quite often in Meetup, but see whether there's another community meets in the same town or city as you. So, for example, in Birmingham, we've got a good network of just digital startup, digital agency people who don't work in the non-profit sector, but are sort of the digital people to go to. So try and sort of cross-pollinate, I suppose, across to another network and ask whether they'd be willing to come along once every few months just to give up a couple of hours of their time to be the surgeons. But as you said, Eli, quite often the people that don't think that they know anything within your existing meetup community will actually know a little bit, even if it is the basics. And quite often the questions that people ask at social media surgeries are the fairly basic questions about increasing page visibility or recording a video and uploading it to YouTube or whatever it might be, getting categories to work on WordPress. They're not the most difficult questions, and quite often it's easy to work it out jointly between yourself and the person who's asking it.
Yeah, it's true. Most of you here in this Hangout are users of Google, which means you can find things and good information more quickly than the average person. And so yeah, so don't forget that that's one of your magic skills.
Hangout, then you are a power user.
That is the truth. You know, if you can suffer with this, you can do it all. And because we've been supporting social media surgeries across the network for a while, we are just trying to make it really turnkey for you. So we've put together on the wiki page a number of sort of interesting resources that will just help you quickly plan your first event. And so that includes everything from the cut and paste event description that you can just drop right into Meetup, as well as template letters that you can send out to potential surgeons to say like, hey, dear so-and-so, you should join us at group name for all these great reasons. You're going to be awesome, hearts, 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 etc. So you'll find that there, as well as there's some printable things like basically a sign-up sheet you can use to match people to shifts when they show up at the surgery, and posters you can print off to promote the event as well. So we've got a good number of additional resources there that could really work for you. So, Pauline, I think we can't hear you right now. Are you able to get back into the audio?
Am I there?
Yeah, there. Could you just like walk through this? Some of the. I can now. Yes.
You can hear me now? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I posted in the chat about having every second meetup as a social media surgery because I was thinking that will ease the strain of trying to find a speaker for every month, and and I'm based at the Impact Hub in Birmingham, and I think there are people there who use social media all the time, and I think I could probably persuade them to, give a few hours. I think culturally in the UK, certainly, people don't have the same willingness to volunteer. Maybe, I don't know, Paul, what you think of that, but I think we're going to have to work a bit harder on that, but it's not impossible.
Yeah, I think it's finding the right people. There'll always be somebody who wants to volunteer, but it might be more difficult to find them. As I said just now, go into the networks. Yes, go to the places like the Impact Hub, the places where I suppose the more sociable, not sociable, maybe social people, where people who are more willing to offer something back to the
Social
community
conscious,
and hang out.
Yeah.
But I really love what Paul actually sort of reminded us of, which is there are in many of our communities lots of other meetups already talking about, marketing, technology, and all of those groups obviously have organizers just like yourself who have got this real depth of expertise in a particular field and are often really excited to go and talk to local nonprofits. And so to go to those groups to sort of find maybe social media surgeons is a great idea. In fact, my event happening next Tuesday here in Vancouver is basically I went to the local video marketing meetup leader and said, would you be interested in doing something in my group? And so she'll be actually the presenter, and it'll be a way for us to sort of bring our two meetups together. So I hope to have more people in the room, and also we get to, find an expert presenter who has their own community. So that's honestly all I had on the agenda for today. What do you guys think? Basically, my real question for this is the reason I'm having this is because I want to make sure that everyone's got an event planned for next month. And so I'm like, let's find something that sort of lowers the barrier to getting to that published point. What do you think about